So, hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are. My name is Sebastian Weber, and it's an honor to be your host, or not precisely your host, but your presenter for this webinar on how to use motion analysis to improve riders' performance. I want to give a really brief introduction about myself. So I have been working in cycling, initially with amateur and recreational cycling, and then with professional cycling in the highest ranks, Pro Tour level, World Tour level, for more than a decade, almost 15 years now. I have been head of performance, head of sports science, head coach whatsoever in teams like some of you guys remember teams like High Road, HTC Columbia, and Katusha, and worked with the sprint train of Lotto Soudal and others. Founded a coaching business called Steps, and have been as a project leader of INSCYD. And I started to work with the technology of LEOMO about 2 years ago, when just when they launched into the market. And those of you who know me or who know my philosophy or all this said about my background, I don't have any bike fitting background, right? So circle it back to this question here. I don't have any bike fitting background. The most important question for me always, ever since I was working in elite sports, is, I kind of ripping this sentence here from Ben Hunt Davis, 3-time Olympian, rowing rowing 8 gold medalist. Will it make the boat go faster? And that's transferring it to cycling, the question I would like to ask, and what I would like to address here. Because at the end of the day, any technology we want to use is about answering this question, or trying to make the cyclist go faster. And for me personally, it's not really doing any much help at the end of the day, if at the end of the day the athlete is not going to go faster. So yes, this is what we are going to address today, and therefore I think it's more performance related. So I'm going to, in the next about 30 minutes to 40 minutes, showing you some examples on how we have used some video analysis and motion analysis technology, not for bike fitting, but especially to improve the technique, so to speak, of athletes, to make them go faster. And I'm going to show mostly examples from time trialing, but not only. And so therefore, I hope that those of you who work in triathlon also can use this example and relate it to triathlon. So I'm going to start with one very popular issue, or common issue, not to say popular, but a common issue that happens in cycling quite a lot. And what I mean with that, you can see here, this is Castroviejo in the World Championships in Richmond a few years ago. And I would like you to focus on his seat position, right? And what he's basically doing is that he's slipping forward on the saddle, and then has these moments where he needs to shift backwards, right? So he's basically not stable. This is a common thing, not only in professional cyclists, but there are very good riders out there who have some kind of the same problem. This is Alberto Contador on the Tour de France, same thing. You can see how he's lifting himself out of the saddle, right? And not being able to stay steady on the saddle. And you might say, oh, that's just for the beauty of it. No, it's not. There's a few issues attached to that. And one issue is that every time an athlete slips forward, he is moving out of, hopefully, getting back to bike fitting, he's moving out, hopefully, out of the most aerodynamic dialed in position, right? And then he slips back, right? So it's a movement forward and then he slips back. So he's actually never in the real best aerodynamic position, supposing that this is, that the position is dialed in. And then there's another thing obvious. In the pushback, you can see that obviously the athlete is pushing himself out of the saddle a little bit. And when you push yourself out of the saddle, you can't push the pedal down. So you're losing torque in that very moment, right? And it's really a symptom of either not good stability and not proper bike fit whatsoever, right? The point is, it's easy to see on camera. It's easy to see when you follow the athlete, but now in a coaching scenario, we are not always able to follow the athletes, right? Another popular example, some of you might remember, this is Tony Martin, TT suit after the World Championships, also in Richmond. So, you know that people have been trying to solve this problem, right? Staying in the best aerodynamic position, but still being stable. Honestly, we have, for example, not only used the grip tape on the saddle, which basically ripped his TT suit. We have used everything, right? And higher times we even used like spray glue, right? So you would see the riders on the start ramp for the TT do like a little, spray of glue, in between their legs to have a better grip on the saddle, so to speak. Again, to the point is you first need to understand it, right? You first need to identify it. You need to be able to measure it with an athlete, and it's very difficult to follow the athletes. So first use case here, long story short, and you don't even need an LVS, you just need a normal type R to do that. What is possible to do is to identify those shifts in the saddle, right? Because the LEOMO, you put a sensor on the pelvic, and you can easily see when the pelvic angle changes, and then you can see also a spike in the accelerometer once the athlete shifts back on the saddle. And you can see those events here. I've marked the other events, for example, somebody hits a pothole or whatever, right, gets out of the saddle. So other events that cause shifting in black, and then the ones that are really interesting us are the ones in yellow, right? So you can see there's approximately every 15 to 24 seconds, right? If you look at the time gaps here, there's a shift. There's a shift of the athlete where the athlete is not able to stay in position. So every 15 to 20 seconds-ish, so to speak, this athlete is losing his perfect position and losing his rhythm, and has to correct that. And again, the point is being able to identify it first allows you to then work on it. Either change the position, change the bike, crank arms, saddle, whatever it is, right? Or do some other kind of training. But you need obviously a tool to identify it and to follow up and see if it got better or worse, so to speak, right? So that's first example. Second example, obviously bike fitting or being able to ride a certain position on the TT bike, low versus high position, right? My point here is I chose these two examples of the Saxo Banks riders, Mick Rogers. You can see lower position, right? It seems to be lower. You can also see less spaces, right? But then his head seems to be sticking up a little bit more, right? So the point is, on a static bike fit, or even in the wind tunnel, right? We can set up basically any position we want, right? I could set up an athlete in a position like this, where the athlete will never be able to actually ride this position outside on the road, right? And get to the most aerodynamic position, okay? Now, when it comes to the real world, it can change, right? The position can change, and the ability to ride in this position can change, okay? And most importantly, where I'm trying to go here is that, back to this example, when you can obviously in a lap scenario, in a wind tunnel scenario, you can lower the handlebar, because most people think, okay, lower better, and there's some truth in it, but only to a certain extent, right? You can lower the handlebar. So the thing is, there will be a compensation where the head is sticking up, right? Because I have to see something. I cannot ride like this, where I don't see anything. This is basically meant for track riding, right? So when I lower the handlebars, the head will stick out. So I kind of misused the normal intended use for the sensors, right? And put basically motion trackers on the neck and on the helmet. And then what you can do with these little sensors, they read the angle to you, right? So I can understand the neck angle and the head angle, right? And giving you this example, this is one athlete, and I try to pick, two similar images, as you can see. Actually, that's two different trials. So that's two different positions. And the question is, which one is the higher one and which one is the lower one? Only from looking at those images. And it's not so difficult to see that obviously this one looks higher, right? You can compare it to this pillar here, right? It's kind of easy to see that this is the higher position and this is the lower position. So actually what we did, we took his normal TT bike and we took out spaces, right? So this is his normal position, and then we got just lowered him, I think 2.5 centimeters or something it was, okay? So you can see he's lower. What is difficult to tell from the picture is if he's compensating. Does he compensate that by sticking up his head? And this is then what the analysis looks like. So black bars, original position, yellow bars, 2.5 centimeters lowered handlebars. So obviously you can see the angle of the chest, right? So we put one sensor on the sternum, obviously is lower. So you can see the chest angle gets lower. The pelvic angle is lower, which is not always the case, by the way, right? You don't necessarily see also a decrease in the hip angle, so to speak. But now you can see he's compensating, right? The helmet angle changes significantly, and the neck angle changes significantly. And the important thing here to just remember is this is not in a lab, right? This is just recorded outside training, because this is where it counts, right? Real world scenario, right? Very, very important, okay? Next example, bringing it back to the question again, will it make the boat go faster? We all are familiar with power files, right? We all use power recordings to understand the performance of the athlete, and we are spending, and especially the athletes are spending most of the time trying to increase performance, trying to increase power output, right? So what you see here is a recording of World Tour time trial performance, right? And you can see there's more or less like, there's steady parts or stretches of the road, where's the steady power output, and you can basically see what the power of the athlete is. Now my question is, if the power output of the athlete would be 435 watts, or it would be 420 watts, would we care, right? Would we like to know this difference? Of course we would, right? It's significant. It is huge, especially at this level, right? So of course, if we would have a difference of 15 watts in power output in a time trial, we would like to know, we would care. It is significant, right? And if we would be able to increase 15 watts of power of our athletes, we would like to know. And what's about CDA levels? These two positions, right? These two positions, you can see the shoulders being wide, or on the right-hand picture, the shoulders being narrow. That's approximately the same difference in power output. In terms of CDA, it is a difference of 0.225 to 0.215. So again, would we care? Of course we would care. If you put somebody in a wind tunnel or on a velodrome testing, and we are able to lower the CDA by this much and gain, by the way, for the same power output, 0.7 kilometers per hour, it is significant. It is huge, right? So we would like to know. The problem is we don't, right? We would like to know the power, we would like to know the CDA when we're outside on the road, the ability to train that, to monitor that, is kind of limited. So again, kind of misusing the devices a little bit. We were basically trying this. So you can see Adam here on a normal TT position, nothing actively changing, just, you know, as he, so to speak, falls into the handlebar. And then actively trying to be lower, right? You can see significantly lower head positions. Really nice to see from the banner up here, right? So trying to be lower with his head, you can see how his head is lower, and then additionally trying to do the shoulder shrug, similar to what we've seen before in the wind tunnel, right? Wide shoulders versus narrow shoulders, actively shrug. Of course, that's nothing that an athlete might be able to do for an hour or even an Ironman, that an athlete might be able to do at super high intensities. But a shoulder shrug and an actively low position that gains you 15, 20, 25 watts, that gains 0.5, 0.7 up to 1 kilometer per hour in speed, is a technique that an athlete who is able to do that, an athlete who is able to embrace that technique, will have an advantage. True story. When there was the World Championships in Limburg, I think it was 2012, I coached a guy called Anton Vorobyev, who was actually winning the gold medal over a guy called Rohan Dennis. And my main part in his coaching was basically training him to do the shoulder shrug, right? And what we needed to do in this time, I would basically fly to his training camp just to follow him in the car, to watch him from behind. He has a radio, and I have the radio in the car, so I could tell him, shrug your shoulder, and I would see it from behind, right, when he loses his position. So we were basically training him to be able to hold this shrug, this much, much more significant, more aerodynamic position for certain distance, for certain parts of the race, right? So whenever there's a long, straight part of the race, he might then be able to use it. That was the idea. And this is not a unique example, right? When I followed Tony Martin in a time trial, like every 10 seconds, you would go like head down, shrug shoulders, whatsoever, right? It's a technique that athletes have to know. So nice thing is, we can identify that. So let me show this to you. We basically put those sensors, and you can see very nicely, we put a sensor on those two positions, on this outside of the scapular and close to the trapezius, right? Additionally to the other sensors. And you can see in the video how the sensor position changes. So for example, this one here on the trapezius, you can see when he shrugs his shoulder, how the angle changes, right? And there's also a change in the scapular one. And what this enables you to do, it enables you to capture a very unique signature, like a unique fingerprint of a position, okay? Let me show this to you. So you have the normal position in dark gray, the low position in yellow, and then the shrug position in a light gray. Okay, so you can see that the angle on the trap changes from step by step, and then there's really no big change in the scapular just from going low, but then shrugging there is a change, right? Helmet the same. You could tell it from the pictures already. It's going lower. Right, and then similar things for the chest. He's obviously able, in his case, I'm going to show you other examples. In his case, he's also going to have a lower chest, a lower hip angle, upper body angle, and then a change in the pelvic angle when he goes lower, and not really a big change when he shrugs his shoulders, right? So obviously going lower, again, quick summary, big changes in trapezius and change in scapula only when he does a shrug. So the change in trapezius versus the change does also change the scapular angle, yes or no, identifies if he's just lower or if he's in shrug. And you will get these individual signatures from other athletes, right? We use it on amateur riders, right? Same same technique changes, right? You can see in this case, the athlete was not able to change anything on his pelvic angle, right? Also, you see the drop in the chest angle. You can see the drop in the helmet angles. And you can see a little bit different picture, but that might be also due to the placement of the sensors, change in trapezius, and then he was not really able to do the shoulder shrug because of a lack of mobility. But again, kind of a signature fingerprint profile. Same thing here, another amateur rider, very, very significant changes in the sensor angles, right? So quick summary, what you're basically able to do is to place the sensors on those specific locations, for example, in a, so to speak, dry land scenario, so stationary on a trainer or something, identify this pattern. This is how we did it also, right? Identify this pattern, this signature, this fingerprint, and then have the athlete go outside riding and actually train in this position. Because that's what we finally need to do. We need to be able to train our athlete to use this much, much faster, the significant more aerodynamic position to their advantage. And with everything like we do in training, right, we wanted to monitor that. We need to monitor it. We need to show the progress to our athletes. Same thing, right? This is why we log distance, why we log power, why we log heart rate, right? Because we need to monitor the process. Same thing. Last example. Cornering. Obviously, cornering is something that can be very decisive for races, not only time trials, but especially only road races, right? And the truth is there are people who corner very, very good and very fast, and there are other riders who struggle in cornering. And another truth from World Tour cycling is that there's no protocol, there's no method, there's no technology which teams, coaches are using to work on that, really, right? It sounds strange, but think about other things, right? When you identify a rider has a problem with a too high body fat, everybody immediately has an idea, this is the method, these are the mechanics that I could use. If you see that a rider has, go back to our previous example, not a great aerodynamic position, right? You have ideas. You go to the velodrome, you go to the wind tunnel, all these kind of things, right? So there's an idea about all of these things, right? Top-end power output, motor pacing for better leg speed, whatever it is. When it comes to cornering, there's virtually almost nothing. The only thing that has happened occasionally with some teams is that they pair their riders with some professional motorcyclist and let them follow them and watch them. But even though it's a very good practice, it still is not really a clear scientific method on how to improve things, okay? And I brought a video here, something that is already now 11 years old, just to show you the importance of this. This is coming back from the HTC High Road Times. What we're basically doing here, we're filming a corner. We're filming a corner of a time trial, and we are overlaying two videos. So it's like shadowing. So you can see two riders coming in up here, and they are together. And when they approach the corner, you can see how they are basically splitting up, okay? And you can see the time running in the top right. So you can see basically what is the distance and the time difference in those two riders coming out of the corner, right? So long story short, what I'm trying to say here is that you are now able to understand, or just to prove, that a better cornering technique, right, is actually very important for performance. It is like free speed, right? If you brake later, if you need to reduce your speed less, if you can accelerate out of the corner faster, right? It's all important for the performance of finally in the race. It's not changing the power output necessary a bit, but it's obviously important for the outcome of the race. And there are other very popular examples for this. You might remember the victory of Chris Froome a couple of years ago on the Tour de France, where he is basically accelerating over the climb, right, on top of the climb. He's attacking on top of the climb. And the only reason why he's able to stay away and extend his lead is by fast cornering, right? So again, another tool in the toolbox, another weapon in the toolbox to be used to gain an advantage over the competition. So what is a method? What is the technology people are using for that? And again, this is how you, for example, can use video and motion analysis. So what you're going to see here now is a corner, and we filmed two guys cornering, right? And I selected some performance relevant metrics. So we're looking at the pelvic angle on the top left. Then I put a sensor on the bike because I want to understand the bike angle, right? How much is the athlete pushing the bike, so to speak, into the corner? And then we have left thigh and right thigh, so left and right leg, so to speak, and the chest angle, okay? So let's watch this together. I sort of bring a video, not only graphs. Let's watch this together and see what happens when this guy is approaching the corner and riding through the corner. Okay, let me do this again for you so you can hopefully see it better. So, when he's approaching the corner, there's not so much happening in the bike angle. The bike angle is fading down a little bit, and the pelvic angle, once he really starts to corner, the pelvic angle stays pretty stable, right? The left thigh angle, you can see drifting, but this is because he's cornering, right? Chest angle is really getting low. You can see this drop here in the chest angle. Once he stops pedaling, and he starts really to push his bike into the corner, you can see it's a well-coordinated movement. The bike is going through the corner. This is why the bike angle fades here, so to speak, or is decreasing a little bit. The chest angle drops, so he has a sudden drop in the chest angle where he really goes lower, okay? And then while he is going through the corner, there's not much really changing, right? Except for once he's in the middle of the corner, you can see the chest angle is already getting up. So once at this point, basically, when he sees he got it, right, he can see through the corner, then his chest angle is opening up again, and you can see his pelvic angle is opening up again, and his bike angle stabilizes, right? So once he's through the corner or half through the corner and he can see the rest of the corner, he starts to open up again, right? So a professional rider seems like, very well coordinated, clean movement. Let's compare this to an amateur rider. And I'm first going to play the video and then give you a little walkthrough. Approaching the corner, and you can see that the pelvic angle stays like stable. Thigh angle is going down, and chest angle is basically going up all the time. So especially the chest angle, which is really important to lower the center of gravity, right? You can see there is not this significant shift. There's a little shift here in the beginning of the corner, maybe a little bit too late. And then the chest angle is creeping up all the time. So he's not holding a stable position. He's basically getting higher all the time, right? Bike angle, similar thing. It's not stable. It is decreasing all the time, right? And also the pelvic angle, he's just not that stable. So obviously, this is kind of a new way to use this technology. So there's not one single, blueprint which you can use, because obviously it depends on the corner, and it obviously depends on the speed, right? But what is possible is exactly the protocol that you see here, going with two riders to the same corner and having one athlete who is able to corner with a very good technique, very fast, and one athlete who is a little bit slower or not so good or needs to improve, right? And then be able to show the athlete who you want to improve what, so to speak, is a good technique here. And this is something very, very common. That's a normal process, right? If you look, for example, I work a lot, since a couple of years, I work a lot with swimming, right? It's normal that you film your athletes and you immediately on deck during the training session show them, right, what they've done good and where they need to improve, right? You show them their faults in the technique so that they can improve it immediately. And this is something where current bike training falls short, right? Current bike training is only about power, cadence, maybe heart rate, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so this was my 4 use cases. And lastly, I would like to thank LEOMO for the possibility to capture those data. And for those of you who want to try, and play around with this technology, the technology is free for a certain amount of time. And I just got told that everybody who's now attended this webinar can basically get another 30 days free trial. So I guess it's a total of 60 days then, right? Where you can basically do these kind of analysis with your own athletes, with yourself, whoever you want, and find out what you can learn from that, and use this, so to speak, to gain free speed by better technique and better aerodynamic posture. And therefore, I wanted to thank you for your attention and hope to see more questions from you coming up here. Thank you.